defensiveness is a integral part of what maintains ideological rigidity, what prevents us from challenging our stereotypes. So when we receive feedback from other people, often in a conflict situation, disagreements. By the way, we will have a whole section of the class. Hi. Is there something you need?
When's your class over?
At noon.
Noon, great. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. When we receive feedback, I was saying we're going to have a session devoted entirely to conflict, because conflict is such an important part of communication that most of us don't navigate very well. So we'll learning how to navigate conflict constructively is very important. And that's also personally, that's a lesson I've had to learn in life. That was a very important lesson for me. So, and it's still a lesson that I'm working on. But so we tend to usually, when people give us some feedback that is not consistent with our beliefs, when they see us differently than the way we see ourselves, when they have different worldviews, we tend to get defensive. And that's our defensiveness. So not only when we get defensive, not only are we defensive about the information that we're receiving, so defensiveness is a way of ignoring, finding a way to discount the information that is given to us. Somebody tells me, let's say somebody tells me, JF, what you did earlier was really inconsiderate. My first reaction is, what? I'm a considerate person. I think of myself as a considerate person. I don't like to believe that I'm inconsiderate. So I might react to like, no, I was not inconsiderate. Like, but you misunderstood me. It's not that the problem is not with me. The problem is with you, right? You didn't perceive me correctly, right? So that's defensiveness. So that's a way of discounting it. Say, I didn't quite hear what you said. You must be mistaken. You didn't perceive me correctly. Instead of asking myself, wow, like a non-defensive way of responding to that kind of feedback is, I was surprised. I didn't realize. Can you tell me more about that? How was I inconsiderate? What happened? How did you feel about my inconsiderate moment? And then, okay, that's what I did. And usually, like most people, some people are deliberately behaving in a rash way, but most of us tend to try to be our best self. And so, it's natural to be defensive. There's nothing, wrong with it. But it's, can we overcome it? Can we overcome that first reaction of like, I've been kind of attacked, or I'm asking to consider something that isn't pleasant about myself. Maybe to change my worldview. Maybe to change my stereotypes. Maybe to realize that I'm subjective, that I have stereotypes. That's another thing. Most of us tend to think of ourselves as, I'm an open-minded person. I don't have stereotypes. I don't have biases, right? I would hope that nobody here in this class is racist, for example, or has or other kinds of isms. But that said, I know that we all simplify reality. So we all have some degree of stereotypes. So that's, but are we willing to consider that? Are we willing to accept that? However difficult it is to accept. So defensiveness gets in our way. When we get defensive, also we get defensive about being defensive. So that makes it, there's a double problem. So if I respond to like the feedback that I gave earlier, the example I gave earlier, JF earlier, you were really insensitive to me, and I get defensive, and then the person says, I think you're getting defensive. So I'm not defensive. There's in fact, we will see this in the next chapter, but Sigmund Freud and Anna Freud made a whole list of different a typology of types of defensiveness that we tend to engage in. So this is not the whole list. The list is like, there's 20 different types of defense mechanisms, as they are called in psychoanalysis. So denial, the example of denial is maybe I'm really upset at somebody, but I'm I'm upset at my boss, and I don't want to show him that I'm upset at him because I think he's too I don't really think that. This is not fully conscious. Defense mechanisms happen in an unconscious fashion. But so I'm upset, but I don't feel I can express my anger to him because it's costly, potentially costly and dangerous. So if he's asking me, JF, are you upset? I say, no, I'm not upset at all. Okay, I'm totally fine, denial. So denial, you're aware that you're feeling something, but you're pretending that you're not feeling it. You're denying your feelings. Related to denial, I'll go to this one. Repression is similar to denial, but except it's unconscious. Repression is when you have you perceive the feelings that you have as so dangerous, meaning that it's so dangerous for you to become aware of them that you repress them. We'll get to that, I think it's next class. But you might know that Sigmund Freud put a lot of emphasis on sexuality, sexual impulses, right? In the time that when he was writing, society was, it was the Victorian era in Europe, and people were pretty repressed sexually. There was a whole, people didn't talk about sex, people were really awkward in the act. And so Freud, part of what he did was like, well, we are inherently sexual beings, we have sexual desires. And us pretending that we're not doesn't make it so. So, in fact, there's a whole, he uncovered a whole host of mental problems related to us repressing our sexuality. But so the repression would be if I have a strong belief that in monogamy, right? I mean, a monogamous relationship, and then I feel attracted to somebody else. That's a problem for my belief, so I can't allow myself to even realize that I'm aware that I'm attracted to somebody else or repress it. Those feelings, I repress them. Now, of course, they will show up in your dreams. That's how Freud, that's why Freud put so much emphasis in dreams. Your dreams tell you part of the truth that your conscious mind is trying to suppress. So working with dreams is a great way of gaining, awareness, consciousness of some of the unconscious phenomena that is happening. So if you have a sexual dream about somebody that you're attracted to in day life, but in day life, in your awake life, you're not allowing yourself to feel that. In the dream, you're like, gee, I had this weird dream where I had this weird sexual thing going on with that person. Like, that's awkward, You might repress the dream and forget about it, but Freud would say, aha, interesting. Like, let's focus on that. What's happening here? What are you really feeling? There's a whole, I'm not going to describe all of these defense mechanisms. The chapter will describe them for you, but let me take just another one. Displacement is when you assign the simple way to describe it is kicking the dog when you're upset, or kicking a can when you're upset, punching a wall, when you're upset. You're really angry at somebody, you can't express that to them directly. You feel like you don't want to get into that kind of conflict. So you redirect your feelings to something else that's less dangerous. The wall will not punch you back. The dog will most likely not stop loving you even if you kick it. Dogs are very loving. I don't advocate kicking your dog, so that's an example of displacement. And yet one more projection, that's an interesting one, is when you assign the feelings you have to somebody else, right? So let's say, like I feel attracted to my new neighbor that just moved in, but I'm like, I can't get there. So instead of realizing that I'm attracted to that new neighbor, I say, I think she's flirting with me. I think my new neighbor is attracted to me. She keeps flirting with me. When in fact, she's not flirting with me. It's just that I'm reading her behavior as flirting because I am attracted to her, but I can't allow myself to realize that. Right? So that would be an example of projection. Defense mechanisms are. Why is it interesting to understand defense mechanisms? This typology of defensiveness can allow you to spot in yourselves when you become defensive, the different ways in which you might become defensive. It can be a lot of fun to spot defense mechanism in other people. Like say, now I have tools to track other people's defensiveness and fault them for it. That's once you master this kind of thing, there's a great temptation to use this new power to sort of categorize others and to read others better. And I would say kind of resist that temptation. Much, much more powerful and much harder to observe your own defense mechanisms than those in others. So yes, practice, look at other people's defense mechanisms, but also spot them in yourselves. Try to see, like, what's a good way to spot your own defensiveness? Whenever you have strong negative feelings, whenever you get upset about something, whenever you feel angry or frustrated, stop yourself and say, oh, what's happening here? Don't suppress the emotion. Accept it. I'm feeling really upset right now. And then what's going on here? Why am I being upset? If somebody, in particular, if somebody has just told you something, and your first reaction is to say, that's not true, or you're wrong, or no, there's a problem with you. I'm not saying that what other people tell you is the truth, or that they're correct. That's not at all what I'm suggesting. But can you consider it? Can you stop and pause and say, let's take a deep breath. I don't like this. I don't think it's true. I'm feeling attacked. I'm feeling out of control, acknowledge all of this. Now, let me put this aside for a moment and hear, what did the person just say? And do I understand what they've just said? Can I ask questions to hear more information about what they just said, to make sure I fully understand it? And is there some truth in that? And could I be upset because, why am I upset? Is it because the other person is wrong, or is it because I'm upset that I might have done something that doesn't correspond with how I would like to be? We all have an idealized view of ourselves. We all want to be fully functioning, caring, loving people who are right, who do the right things. So we have all of this, aspiration to be this great person, and hopefully we are most of the time. We are trying, we're doing our best, but very often we fail. We don't match our ideal self. Certainly, the best way to become a better self is not to ignore when you are not being your best self, is to actually investigate that. Now, we'll talk about this later, but let me say something about self-esteem here. A key concept in psychology is self-esteem. And that's very different from self-confidence. People tend to mistake self-confidence and self-esteem. I would say, in fact, self-esteem and self-confidence are inversely correlated. So self-confidence is when it could be related to arrogance. It's like, I know I'm right, I'm smart, I'm smarter than most people. And I usually, act as if I was right and correct, and I am my best self, and I don't question that. That's self-confidence, right? Self-esteem is when you accept yourself as you are. You feel loving to yourself and accepting of yourself, regardless of when you're wrong or right. So you accept that you could be wrong sometimes, and you forgive yourself and still love yourself even when you're wrong. That's a very different kind of strength than self-confidence. Self-confidence motivates you to cover up your flaws, your mistakes, when you're incorrect, or when you're irresponsible, or when you're inconsiderate. Self-esteem says, you know what, I'm a pretty okay human being. I'm not perfect, but I'm pretty okay. I'm okay with my imperfections too. I can investigate them. So it takes a huge amount of groundedness. It takes a huge amount of strength to be able to accept that you're imperfect, to live with that, and to, furthermore, to investigate it and not fall apart. So self-esteem, I would say, is related to, if you feel you're a wretched human being, that there's nothing wrong about you, that there's nothing right about you, that everything about you is terrible, then it's, obviously it's going to be very hard to have either self-esteem or self-confidence. So we all have, some beliefs about ourselves that we have things we like about ourselves and things we don't like or even hate about ourselves. Can you find a balance and say, okay, on the balance, I'm okay, On the balance, I'm okay. And then appreciate the good things about yourself. Learn your true positive sides, and those negative sides, accept them and sometimes change them. That's self-esteem. So it takes a long time to develop. It's a long life process, true self-esteem. When you have true self-esteem, you're less likely to be defensive. Those people who, when they've done something wrong, they say, you're right, I screwed up here. I screwed up. I did that. I hurt you. Like, I hear that. I wasn't considerate there. And not defensively, not like, okay, all right, I wasn't considerate. That's kind of a defensive way of doing it. But really taking it in. Like, I was, and it hurts me to realize I've done that. To allow yourself to have feelings about that. It's okay to have feelings, like to not be happy about not being perfect. See, I don't like that. I don't like to be that way. I'm upset about it, but I want to hear more about it. So that's another kind of strength, the strength of exploring, experiencing some degree of pain, of emotional pain, from not being perfect. Right? Why do I emphasize this? I'm going to make a blanket statement about you guys. I think you guys are smart. You guys are successful. You guys are here because you are smart and successful. You're used to probably being the better students, if not the best students in your class. You have succeeded in various ways, scholastically, in sports, in different domains of life. You've got along with people. So there's a lot of things that are right about you. And that's why it's particularly difficult to accept being wrong. Because you are so used to being right, and usually other people might even look to you for the right answer. They might ask you, they might think you're smarter than them, they might think you're better than them. And so you're like, I have to be the better person who knows. So it's particularly difficult to switch from that role and say, okay, well, I am all of these things. I'm smart. I am successful. I have all of those qualities. And now let's focus on when I'm wrong, when I fail, when I'm not fully perfect. Let's learn that extra thing that I can learn.